Welcome this week to the Across the Sky podcast. I'm Kirsten Lang with the Tulsa World, here with my colleagues Sean Sublett and Matt Holliner. Joe Martucci off this week, but he'll be back next week. And our guest this week, a very impressive young lady. Her name's Peyton Galyean. She is a University of Oklahoma student and an avid golfer, and has some real interesting stuff to talk to us about when it comes to the two. She calls it her two loves. Today, we have a very special guest. Her name is Peyton Galyean, and she is an University of Oklahoma student. In her junior year, she's studying meteorology, but then also an avid golfer. And I got to meet her at the AMS Broadcast Conference a couple of weeks ago back in Phoenix. Peyton, you gave an awesome speech when you were there, and it was so nice to meet you. And we're just so glad that you're here on our podcast with us today. So welcome.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your background, because it's kind of a neat one. Just kind of how you got into meteorology and golf, and the two loves, how you brought them together.
So I'm originally from Houston, Texas, and I grew up on Galveston Bay. And in 2008, Hurricane Ike made landfall in Galveston, and I was 7 at the time, and I didn't really know what was going on. We don't learn about hurricanes in school, and my grandmother lives on Galveston Bay. The storm surge produced 5 feet of water in her home. And at the time, my dad was transitioning from being a law enforcement officer to the city emergency management coordinator. So I just started tagging along with him to different work events. And through that, I was able to meet so many National Weather Service officials, broadcast meteorologists throughout the Houston area. And I realized I wanted to be a meteorologist. And as I got older, I really fell in love with broadcast. Being able to have that connection with your viewers, especially being through multiple hurricanes, Ike, Harvey, Rita, just to name a few, you know what people are going through, and you can really have that connection. Like, I know what it's like to have everything you own sit on the side of the curb. It's going to get better, I promise. But at the same time, my dad also introduced me to golf. I was in middle school when I started playing golf. I played 7th grade and 8th grade, and then I got to high school, and I made my varsity team, and I still didn't really know what I was doing, but I started taking it more seriously, and then I started getting scholarship offers. But I always knew I wanted to go to OU because OU has such an incredible meteorology program, and so I was kind of in the in-between, like, do I still continue playing golf? It's something I really love, but I've always wanted to be a meteorologist. I decided to go play golf for a junior college in Oklahoma just to kind of help with the financial aspect of it, get some credits out of the way that would transfer. I played for a semester at Seminole State College in the fall of 2019 and just realized college golf was not what I thought it would be. So I decided to transfer to OU, and then a pandemic hit 8 weeks later. So right before the pandemic happened, I had joined the club golf team at OU because I didn't want to give it up completely. Even though I had a bad experience, I had closed that door with my previous school, and I wanted a new opportunity. And then with the pandemic happening, it just never went anywhere. But soon after, I realized I needed a job to kind of help pay for school as well. So I applied to local golf courses in Norman, and I've been working at one and more for about 3 years now, and I absolutely love it. And that's when I kind of started realizing weather has such an impact on golf that people don't realize. Like, yes, it's an outdoor sport. Yes, you have to deal with all the lightning protocols, but when you realize that if there's morning dew on the ground, your ball's not going to roll as far. Those tiny water droplets are going to have an impact on your ball, especially when you're putting. That's why you need to clean your ball every so often, and the wind is a huge crucial factor. And I was like, no one's doing this. So on a whim, I just decided to start posting stuff on social media, and the golf teams at OU, the coaches loved it. They reached out to me. They're like, I love how you're doing forecasts for all our tournaments. And it's something I started doing for fun, but I've kind of thought about this as kind of like my dream job. There's no one that does this for a living. Sure, there's private meteorologists that do this behind the scenes, but how cool would it be to work for the PGA or Live Tour or the Golf Channel and be able to go to all these tournaments the pros are at, and not only explain to them, but the people watching at home how the weather is impacting their scores.
Wow, that's amazing. I had a colleague in college. He did a couple of summer interns. This is back in the early 90s with the PGA. He did a lot of forecasting for the PGA on tour with them for a while, and learned a lot about golf and weather and obviously those big impacts. Wind, kind of obvious. Admittedly, I would not have thought about the dew first thing in the morning for the early tee times. But what other things are out there that aren't immediately obvious? Obviously, you want to get out of the way when there's lightning showing up. But outside from wind, lightning, rain, dew, what other kinds of environmental things are out there in the weather that play into the game that may not be as obvious?
So temperature. So when it's actually above 95 degrees, your ball can travel farther. And when it's below either 55 or 45 degrees, your ball won't travel as far just due to the heat transfer between your club face and the ball, which not a lot of people realize. When it's super hot outside, I notice my drives are a lot longer. My iron shots are a lot longer. And when it's colder, I always thought it was just my body trying to conserve heat and everything and try and be more stiff, but it's actually just the air temperature not allowing the ball to travel as far.
You say, is that more of a contact, or is that more of the air moving through the density of, is the ball moving through the density of the air, or is that more of a contact with the club face and the ball?
It's a little bit of both, because you rely on that contact to give you all the energy to travel farther. And when there's not enough energy being transferred, you don't have as much energy to travel through the air.
And then, we've talked about this with baseball too. I guess the humidity comes into play as well. If the humidity levels are higher, I'm guessing the ball is probably going to travel higher, just like we talked about home runs going up when there's higher humidity levels in addition to the higher temperature. So I guess humidity plays a factor as well.
Yes. Like yesterday when I was at work, I was on the cart and there was a kids tournament, and I was just noticing how high their shots were traveling. And even when I'm on the range, how high my ball is going, especially being from Houston where it's always humid. My shots are so incredibly high, and I try to control it and get it back down, because when your ball is higher in the air, you don't have as much control of where it's going. Whereas if you keep it kind of level, you have more of that control.
And Peyton, what about altitude? How does that affect your game?
So I went to Colorado last summer and I played golf, and I have never hit a ball farther. I don't know if it was just luck or if it was the altitude. I never really looked into it, but I was pleasantly shocked by how far my drives were going, how high I was getting this into the air. So I believe altitude has played a role in it. I haven't really thought about it, especially I grew up under sea level and Oklahoma's relatively flat. But exactly, like we know NFL teams, when they go and play in Mexico City, they go to Denver to get their body immune to it, because altitude also does take a toll on your body itself, not just the sport.
So what do you want to do after you graduate? I mean, you're doing a lot of weather communications on social media. Do you think you want to continue to go into weather communications, or do you think you might skew more toward golf forecasting and getting in with the golf organizations? Have you made that decision yet, or are you still kind of keeping it all out there?
I don't really know. I'm kind of just putting my feet into everything right now since I still have time at OU. I'm minoring in broadcast meteorology. Local news will always be there. I'd love to go back to the coast and talk about hurricanes. I'd love to stay in Oklahoma just with the severe weather here. But if the opportunity did present itself to, say, do some affiliate work and kind of freelancing with NBC Sports and the Golf Channel and the tours, I would not turn that down.
You said that your dad was an emergency manager. Is he still doing that now as well?
No, he retired. When I graduated high school, both my parents retired from law enforcement and moved to Oklahoma. My mom's family is from the state, so they decided to come here and live out retirement life.
Are you the first in your family to pursue the meteorology track?
Yes. My brother is a project manager in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but I'm the weather nut.
All right. Well, we will be back right after this break with more with Peyton Galyean. You're listening to Across the Sky. Welcome back. We are here with Peyton Galyean, and a University of Oklahoma student, an avid golfer. And Peyton, we're just so glad to have you on today. I wanted to talk with you too. When we met at the AMS broadcast conference, it was pretty quickly obvious that you and Ginger Z from ABC have a pretty good relationship. She, even had pictures of you in her speech that she was giving, which was pretty cool. So tell us a little bit about how that started and, kind of how it's going.
So when I was in middle school, when I realized I wanted to do broadcast meteorology, in the Houston area, it's a top 10 market. There wasn't a lot of females. And yes, there was females at every station. Now, obviously, the presence is a lot better represented. But I was like, there's not really someone I could look up to that looks like me. And I remember coming home from school and the Moore tornado had just happened. And I turned on my TV and the Houston stations were taking ABC coverage from Oklahoma City. And I saw Ginger. And I was like, that's who I want to be. She's a meteorologist. She's out in the field. She is reporting on what just happened. And so I wanted to be just like her. She was my idol. And then after my freshman year of high school, my family started planning a family vacation to New York. And at that time, Ginger was on Dancing with the Stars. And so my mom, on a whim, I didn't even know this, she emailed her. I was like, hey, my daughter loves you, basically. She wants to be just like you. She wants to go to OU, study meteorology. She wants to go into broadcast. And she responded. She was like, yes, Dancing with the Stars will be over at that point. I can't wait to meet her. And so it was June 6th of 2016. We were part of that outside audience for GMA. And Ginger came outside and she came up to me and she was like, are you Peyton? And I was like shell-shocked. I was like, OMG. And I had a sign I made and it said, hey, Ginger, KHGX to KOKX, which is the Houston Galveston radar to New York. So it showed that I traveled from Houston to New York to be there. And she signed it and I still have it today, however many years later, 7 years later. But what I thought would be just like a quick interaction turned into a mentorship. We stayed in contact through it all. Harvey dumped 52 inches of rain in my hometown. And throughout everything, she was checking up on me. She's like, how's your family? How are you doing? How's your neighborhood? And I was just sending her pictures of everything. And once I got to college, I was like, do I just want to do journalism with a minor in meteorology? And she was like, you want to do this so long, just stick with meteorology. It's going to be hard. I know it's hard. I've been through it, but you can do it. And so she's always been in my back pocket, just kind of pushing me and wanting me to succeed. And she is just someone I can talk to all the time. I texted her the other day. All my news stuff we do with OU Nightly, I send her everything and I get feedback from her. And just knowing that she is such an advocate for women in STEM, the next generation, a female meteorologist, she is someone I admire so much. And I'm so excited and happy I know her.
It is so wonderful to hear. She is tremendous and she has been a wonderful advocate. No question about that. I'm very happy to see somebody with her caliber at ABC. Let's go back a little bit. And you said that the hurricanes in your youth really influenced you. Let's talk about that a little bit more. Are there 2 or 3, specific events, regardless of which hurricane they were, that kind of are etched in your consciousness that kind of led you a little further down this path?
I would definitely say Ike in 2008 and Harvey in 2017. Ike, just because it impacted me so much. My grandmother has a 2-story house on Galveston Bay, and the entire first floor had to be gutted. And I remember there's a table that she had on the first floor, and it had little angel statues because my grandfather had passed away the year before. And the table rose up in the 5 feet of water, and then it went right back down to where it was, and none of the angel statues fell over. And we could see, like, on the table, all the debris and, like, chip marks of where water had been. And so that was something that just stuck out to me. And you still see it, like today, there's these random things that stay put in weather events that it's just mind-boggling. But knowing Ike impacted me so much, my school district became one of the refuge school districts for all the Galveston kids to come to. We had to bring in portable buildings for the additional kids, even though my school took on water. And again, with Harvey, I woke up to a boat going down my street. Like, you don't see that on an everyday basis. And just knowing I was at a school for so long, my school was damaged once again. Every school in the school district was damaged. So many of my friends and principals and even our superintendent, their house is flooded. And there was so much you could do, but not enough at the same time. And everyone was just really nice to one another. Like, it didn't matter where you came from, who you are, what you do. Everyone's just with one another. And it sucks that it was a time of crisis, but seeing the after effects and going through that not one, but multiple times, just it kind of makes hurricanes my favorite because everyone can talk about what they're like. But once you go through them and you're impacted by them, it's a different sort of feeling.
Yeah, it's probably the one good thing about these hurricanes is the way people do come together after the event passes. Everybody, it seems like there's so much division, especially you get on social media and all the arguments and bickering, but it seems to suddenly go away when they're saying that everybody can unite and focus on and recover from. Yeah, that is, the silver lining of these things. People do seem to mellow out a little bit and are a little bit friendlier to each other. Bringing it back to golf, I want to talk a little bit about, safety on the golf course. Of course, when we're talking about thunderstorms, but also we were talking about how good it is, when it's hot and humid, your ball will travel farther. But think about golf, and I think especially for people who don't play regularly, I mean, if you're playing a full 18 holes, you are out in the heat and humidity for quite a while. So let's talk a little bit about safety on the golf course. What should people be doing?
So obviously lightning, kind of the rule of thumb is 8 to 10 miles within the last lightning strike. You have the 30-minute relief because lightning can strike outside of any thunderstorm, and you don't want to be walking around with 14 metal sticks in your bag. That's just, safety is number one priority, but definitely the heat. I mean, yesterday, Oklahoma was in an excessive heat warning, and I was on the cart selling drinks yesterday, and I was out there for hours, and it was brutal. I had one of those towels around my neck to keep me cool, keep my neck cool, and I always wore those. When I played, I'd have multiple, and I'd switch them out after every few holes. And yesterday, there was a tournament going on, and so many kids were just dropping. They could not keep up because walking 18 holes is hard. The stamina your body has to have. If you're carrying a 50-pound bag or you're using a push cart, you're pushing a 50-pound bag, it's so much more toll on your body. And especially in a dry heat, you don't really realize you're sweating as much, which means you can get dehydrated a lot faster. And walking 18 holes, that's about 4 to 5 hours of play. And if the pace of play is slower, that's an additional hour, making it 6. And when you're outside for that long, it's crazy. I'm not built up to as much as I used to, but when I was in high school, I was playing like 10 tournaments a summer, and it was no big deal to me at that point because I had paced myself so much. I had been drinking so much water. It was usual for me, but so many tournaments I would go to, girls and boys would drop out just because their body couldn't handle it. And it's not that we're pushing our bodies so much in this heat. It's just we aren't preparing enough because, yes, especially right now, that massive heat wave going on from Oklahoma City down to Dallas, Houston, Arizona. It's crazy. Arizona's hitting over close to 120 degrees now. El Paso's recording so many days above 100 degrees. It's just insane. And people don't think about the heat factor because they're like, oh, even if I'm driving a cart, it's fine. I was on a cart yesterday for 6 hours and I was still sweating tremendously. I was downing water just to keep myself there and present, because then you deal with the mental side of golf, which is a whole nother spiraling event we could talk about. But when you are having the ongoing effects of heat illness, your mind starts to function differently, and then you can lead down that hole, and that will start affecting your game.
And I think the other thing that people forget about, is when you're out in a golf course, there's usually not a lot of shade. There might be trees on the side, but where you are, not going to get much shade. So yeah, the when it comes to heat, especially what we're dealing with this summer, I mean, I think you really can't underestimate it. The amount of time that you are in the sun, exposed to the elements. It's definitely something that we try and stay. Once you start feeling the impacts, you really got to, hopefully you do have a card that would help rather than walking the full 18 holes. But, it just comes back to the general heat safety. If you can plan on, playing in the early morning or the evening hours, that's going to be the way to go to avoid the hottest part of the day when the sun is highest in the sky. Keeping the water, the Gatorade handy. Carry it with you and bring more than you think you're going to need. I think that's the best advice.
Peyton, thanks so much for joining us. We really enjoyed having you on, and it was really awesome to hear a little bit too about weather and how it pertains to golf, because I think we all kind of learned something from that. So thanks so much for being here with us this week. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, and if anyone wants to follow you or get any golf updates, do you still do that on your social media?
Yes, all my social medias, my TikTok, my Instagram, my Twitter, my Facebook, it's WX, which stands for weather, with Peyton.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks so much, Peyton.
Thank you.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
The moon reaches new phase Monday afternoon, July 17th. That means that the moon will be hidden in the sun's glare for a few days, but will gradually become more visible again as more and more of the side facing Earth receives that direct sunlight. But that doesn't mean the moon is invisible. Even with no sunlight directly shining on the lunar surface, a faint version of the moon can still be made out through Earthshine. Earthshine is sunlight reflected off of Earth onto the moon and then back to us. And this time of year, it's at its most visible, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere. This is because the Northern Hemisphere is tilted towards the sun during our summer months, providing lots of reflective surface. Now, the opposite time of year can also produce prominent Earthshine, as the snowpack across Canada and the northern U.S. states is even better at reflecting light than the land and the oceans. While you're out there hunting for that Earthshine, look for Venus in the western sky after sunset. You can't miss it. The crescent moon will be up and to the right early in the week. This is a great time to look for that Earthshine. Just above Venus is Regulus, the brightest star in the constellation Leo. Up and to the left of Regulus, that's Mars. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
All right, welcome back, guys. She was a real sweet girl, wasn't she? And she has got a very impressive, I think, future ahead of her with, combining some of the two things that she loves and just very smart.
She seems very forward thinking as well. I mean, she's doing a lot of weather communications, science communications, golf communications, showing how these things merge on her social media accounts. She's already made very good contacts with Ginger Z, who's doing fabulous work at ABC. Very bright future for her, no question. And I think when I see the younger professionals like this, it makes me feel good that science communications, weather communications, impacts, those kinds of things, we're in good hands going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I won't hold it against her too much that she's going to the University of Oklahoma. I went to the University of Texas at Austin, and I don't have much love for OU. So I was kind of biting my tongue a little bit when she's talking about the OU stuff. But they do have a good meteorology program. I'll acknowledge that. It is a good school to go to for meteorology. And I like that, she's into golf. I do. I wish I could play golf more often. I feel like I'm always so busy. Now that I'm in Chicago, the long winter limits the time frame for playing golf a little bit. But I do love playing golf. When the weather is nice, it is fantastic, to just get out there and play a round of golf. But keep in mind weather safety. When you hear that rumble of thunder, don't risk it. Don't try I'll just finish this hole. No, it's not worth it. Because if you can hear thunder, you can get struck by lightning. So just go ahead to the clubhouse, grab yourself a drink, wait it out, and then wait 30 minutes after the last rumble of thunder, and then you can resume the game. And of course, remember the heat safety as well. So it was a great chat with her, and even though she's a suitor, I'll
Well, as a Penn Stater, we also kind of have a love-hate relationship with Oklahoma because we understand that there are certain things they can do in Oklahoma that we can't do at Penn State, and we acknowledge that. But, it's still Oklahoma, so sometimes I'm kind of with you. I had a lot of friends that went to OU, so it's all good. And I've been to the National Weather Center. It's gorgeous. I mean, it is gorgeous, straight up. It's a wonderful facility, and it's a wonderful program.
Does it pain you to say that, John?
It's a little painful. It's a little painful, but you know what? If I'm going to go study tornadoes, man, that's where you go. It just is.
I should have asked her, too, why she was so close to Bryan College Station growing up in Galveston, right there, Texas A&M.
Yeah.
But she chose OU. But I'm sure, program wise. I mean, I don't. I'm sure that had something to do with it. But yeah, no. Going back to the lightning safety too. The thing that was kind of funny that she's right is that you're walking around with a bunch of metal sticks in your hand, so probably don't want to be out there. But it was great to have her on. And coming up next week.
After weather and golf, of course, we've got hurricane preparedness for homeowners. The oceans have also been crazy hot. We've heard a lot about that. I got Zeke Hosfather from multiple different agencies. He's a climate scientist who does a lot of good work and looking at the impacts of climate change in the oceans. Gardner Chase will be joining us in a few weeks, ocean and coastal safety. We got football and heat coming up. Doug Haas is going to join us from the Corey Stringer Institute to talk about that. So there's lots of good stuff coming up in the next few weeks.
Sounds good. Joe will be back next week. I'm out on vacation next week, heading to Colorado with my husband and my little kids. So I won't be here, but Joe will be back. So should be fun. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us this week on Across the Sky podcast, and we will catch you next time around.